We are live. Exciting.
Hello and welcome. We're just we start 5 minutes early now, so folks can enter the room and start to get ready.
Yeah.
We're starting sooner, no pun intended.
Starting sooner.
That's good.
We're starting sooner. I love it.
Hey, that's a good idea, starting sooner. Give some people some time to think about the idea. If any questions that people want to ask during this too, it's time to kind of think about that.
Yep, use the comment feature. We'll definitely get to some questions.
Yeah, that's the best part.
I love the questions. I love it when people ask us stuff.
Yeah. Oh.
Now we don't need to talk about the eclipse anymore. That's over.
Well, do we? I don't know that we need to. Actually, I have been having like a lot of strange dreams since the eclipse. I'm like, what happened?
I did have a nightmare last night.
Me too.
I don't want to go into it, but it was a pretty cool nightmare.
Oh, it was a cool
did it
nightmare.
Involve AI at all or anything like that? Or?
No, very scary horror. But I've had dreams like that since I was a kid. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I attended a comedy show.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
My friend performed. College friend. It was really interesting. It was really good. There was one woman who was the headliner, and extremely funny. And she's like severely. And she's in a wheelchair and she can move it herself with and it's just, I've never seen someone perform like that in a wheelchair who could, it was unbelievably cool. Just so witty and funny. And she'd take her wheelchair right up to people's faces and then back up and then go somewhere else. And it was so neat and cool. It was inspiring.
I love that.
That's great. Back when I lived in Seattle, I had a friend who was doing improv classes. There was really cool, and unfortunately, it just shut down. I think it was called like Jet City Improv. It was awesome.
Wow.
And yeah, there'd be like 20 people participating in a full improv show. It was just so fun because they'd participate with the audience. They'd ask stuff. We'd say crazy things back. It's just real fun.
Yeah, improv, nothing like it.
Yeah, I did that in high school. It was fun.
Oh, nice.
I took an improv class once. It was like 2 or 3 days of learning tons of improv games and then proceeded to use them for years in our training.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the thing. It allows you to learn how to kind of be flexible for learning and help people learn.
Right.
And it is funny. It's all games. You're right. Like that's how you learn the skills is just play this game.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have some nice notes prepared for some of the Sooners that we want to talk about, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
We had a great conversation yesterday.
Yes.
Touches a lot of things sooner when you start to think about what that means in the context of what we do.
It's true.
I might be asking what your favorite Sooner is of all the Sooners.
I already know mine.
I know mine. I do know mine.
Me too.
You know one? Do you have one, Tara? A favorite Sooner?
That's a good question. My favorite Sooner in context would probably be all I think of is sooner rather than later. Which actually kind of plays into like the vagueness of the word, but the word can be as specific as you like. And I think in our sense, very intentional.
Very specific. Yeah.
Well, I think we are live now officially because it's 9 a.m. Pacific. And so I want to welcome everyone who's here. We have a half hour together and we're going to just dive right in. Please feel free to ask questions or make comments. We love to hear that, your feedback and your questions. So why don't we, what we're going to do is we're going to jump in right away, and then maybe 5-10 minutes in, we'll introduce ourselves. So we get straight to the content. Yeah. So sooner is a really important word around industrial logic. Why is sooner such an important word here?
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I could take it. So I think we were saying earlier that we're specifically using the word sooner. There's some synonyms that might make sense in this case, but they don't. So words like quicker, hurrying, rushing. So we don't mean that we're going to hurry building products. We're not rushing out a half-baked product out to customers. No, we're delivering sooner. So sooner really is less, better. There's a comma in the less and better. But really doing that, we get value out quicker to everybody involved in the product, including the customer.
Yeah. Just to kind of play off of what Kody said, I also think like faster is a word in there that means a very different thing to me than sooner. To me, sooner means there is intent behind it. It's not just let's move as fast as we can to get something done, which can mean tripping and feeling kind of not graceful, right? Just very, it's almost like at all costs, let's just move as fast as we can. Sooner to me, it means kind of getting ahead of the curve, being more strategic about why we want to do something in a sooner fashion, which is really improper grammar, but you know what I mean.
Right. I mean, we've all had experiences with service providers or, places in the world where we're waiting for something, right? I mean, the worst stories I would used to hear in Italy, you'd be waiting online for some important transaction at a bank, and then they would just close. And like, now you got to come back and wait online again, and it's just like, wow, they're not fast. They're not getting stuff done quickly. To me, I'm slightly different. I like words like quick and fast. I don't like words like hurry and rush.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if service is fast and quick, you're really happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
If I can, like, deposit a check by taking a picture of it with my phone, I'm empowered to do something incredibly quickly instead of driving to the bank and dealing with the bank people. That's just amazing. So to me, there's this really close relationship between sooner and fast and quick that's good stuff. And then over here is the problematic stuff, which is the rushing and the hurrying and the later, where it all happens later. And it's so yeah, that's how I look at it. But sooner is a word we all rally around. And there's lots of different sooners when it comes to like teamwork, development, everything. What's your favorite sooner?
Yeah, I think for me, it's sooner with human conversations. So being able to have those talks about, if something like having those conversations of if we're building something or we're waiting, it's a lot of waiting. Like waiting is tied to the hurrying and the rushing for me. It's this wait. Well, what if we don't wait? What if we actually just start having these conversations sooner? So that if we are stuck somewhere, well, maybe something is too big. Maybe. And so how can we start to talk about, well, if we want to do something sooner, what could that look like? So I feel like sooner can really shift conversations to make it about something that's a smaller slice rather than us maybe signing up for something that would be much more valuable if we could deliver a smaller piece of it sooner.
Great. And that says a lot in terms of like, so if you're having a conflict with someone and you wait to resolve it, you're saying that's going to lead to poorer performance within the team, and that's going to slow us down in terms of delivering sooner. So deal with that conflict sooner. Maybe not immediately when you're really angry,
right?
But hopefully sooner.
Yeah, I think that we do ourselves a disservice by we think like, well, now's not the right time. And sometimes that might be true to like have a tough conversation. And to your point, Josh, like since I do so much work in like the org behavior realm here at IL, I think that if you're nervous system is completely out of whack, you're feeling very reactive, maybe that's not the right time. But either doing simple practices like taking some deep breaths to be able to have that conversation, or having the conversation sooner of, hey, I need some time to digest this. Let me just have 10 minutes and then I'll come back to you. So kind of putting a pin in it to say, this is important, we need to do this, but making sure we do that instead of just letting it muddy the waters, because that just creates more meetings where we don't get anywhere. And then we're kind of left with having to rush.
Right. So this is the human side of it, of Sooner, and not rushing into a reaction that would make things even worse possibly, but Sooner has the right timeline. It's where things are graceful. And what about you, Kody? What's your favorite Sooner?
Yeah, my favorite Sooner, I think really I take Sooner and I think about fast feedback as really kind of what we're talking about here. And there's the macro of that, of like product fast feedback, of experimenting, getting things out quickly to customers. And there's also the micro of, okay, let's actually get fast feedback around, oh, does this design work? Even trying to technically build it. Is this one line of code that I'm writing actually creating the behavior that I want? So using something like test-driven development to get fast feedback. So I think, to me, I think fast feedback's why I'm even here as somebody who loves XP. So Sooner to me really speaks for that part of it. What can we do to get faster feedback today? What's the smallest thing we can do to get faster feedback?
Right. Excellent. And my favorite is it's very coupled to a principle in the manifesto for Agile Software Development, which is maximizing the amount of work not done.
Yeah.
And that may trip some people up. Like, what do you mean by that? Maximizing the amount of work not done? Well, if you can take something that, let's say, initially it's a very, very fancy feature someone wants, and it could take 3 weeks to build it, but you sort of figure out, you know what, there's a way to give 80% of that value in like 2 days. And it's really going to give the user what they need, but it's not going to have all the bells and whistles you've asked for. Why don't we try that first and see what happens? Maybe you should expose it to a few people, get some feedback on that. Again, back to the Sooner feedback, right? Let's try that. I call it a bargain. Right? Let's look for a bargain, high value at low cost. And it means not doing a bunch of work, maximizing the amount of work not done in order to learn sooner whether we hit the nail on the head. Like, a lot of times users are perfectly happy with the plain vanilla version you just released, and that doesn't have the fancy features, the heated seats and the moonroof, as I like to say. It's just, so to me, if I want to go faster, I figure out what I don't need to do. And that's one of my favorite Sooners is I call it bargain hunting, looking for those bargains, because they get me into production sooner.
Yeah. I love that. What do I not need to do? It can eliminate so much that just becomes noise and might not even be valuable. And it's something we can just kind of cut out of the periphery.
Right.
And this is where talking to your customers, talking to everybody involved, that's where you can really find these pockets, these bargains.
Right. Yeah. If you don't talk to your customers sooner and you don't interact with them and get their feedback sooner, we just worked on a big giant point of sale system, right? And there wasn't sufficient interaction with users about the UX. The feedback did not come soon enough on UX. So there's a whole bunch of professional UX design happening, but not enough interacting with customers to see, is this workflow going to work for you, or how would we change it sooner? That was coming a little too late in the work, which we didn't have any control over. I think so. So it's like we almost want to aim for sooner in most of the things we do. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, as a human who kind of really started to really get my grounding in tech in the UX space. I remember when I first started coaching and working with teams where I'd say, how often do you speak with your customers? And I remember a lot of defensiveness from leaders who would say, well, we talk to our customers, they're internal. Like that meant that we talked to them, when it turned out they met with them maybe once every 6 months. So that's such a huge gap in time where you miss all those bargains that you're talking about. So we started implementing things where we would have developers and, QA folks and whoever could go sit with those users and actually experience, what are they experiencing? They're across the street. Why are we not taking advantage of that? So I think there is some low hanging fruit that sometimes we miss because we feel like we have to be, rushing or hurrying to get something done.
Yeah, well said. It's that human interaction. That's the collaborations and the individuals and their interactions, right? That's so utterly important to making sooner, to implementing sooner. And just to be clear, we are not talking about the Oklahoma Sooners. It's a team. It's probably an amazing team. I don't follow them, but we wish them well. They're called the Oklahoma Sooners, so
I have no idea.
Maybe that should be our favorite team.
We rally around the word, but not the team. Sorry.
Sorry, team.
What else do we want to say about Sooner? What excites you about that word?
I think that something one of our colleagues, Tim Ottinger, talks a lot about, and I've had the opportunity to be able to call him friend and colleague as we've taught workshops around the world together. He talks a lot about squeezing versus slicing. And for me, that is definitely a Sooner thing of being able to break something up. And that kind of goes back to, I guess, what I was first saying about, when we all are talking about creating something together, from the behavior of a user all the way to, deployment, are we taking on something too big? So I think it kind of goes back to that. If we're trying to squeeze something in, it's going to be really stressful. Like you can even feel it in your body and being like, when you feel stressed and rushed and you're trying to squeeze something in. Mm-hmm. But when you slice it, you can take a different approach. And actually, to Tim's credit, I try and do that now whenever I can. And I catch myself trying to squeeze in, it's a Saturday and I'm like, I'm going to do 10,000 things. And then I think, but do I have to do all those things? What if I just sliced it and did just a few?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that story is really powerful. And I think it really, again, I hear this story all the time with some agile teams that will be doing, sprints, 2-week sprints. And they're like, oh, what if we squeezed in some additional things on top of the other list of stories that we've already decided on? And even though, like, they call it stretch goals, I've heard. And sometimes what that does is just cause more stress onto the team. They should have called stress goals. Because it's like, okay, I get more things done. Now I'm just rewarded with even more work, and they kind of expect this to also get done.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you a real quick story. I had a deadline once. I was giving a talk at an XP conference in Italy. And the talk really wasn't a talk. It was a game that I had invented called Explanations, with an XP capitalized in Explanations. And it was this interesting card game that you play with my XP playing cards. And I had decided to make a digital version of it that I could play with live people. And Kent Beck signed up, and Ward Cunningham, and I think Linda Rising was there, and they were going to be players of the game. So here I am programming the game before the event. So I have an actual deadline, because there's an actual date on the calendar where I'm doing this live. And Explanations has a fair number of complicated rules to it, right? And so I'm programming the game, and I'm like, oh God, there's a lot to do here. And then I started to think, wait a minute. I know the rules. All I really need to do is create the ability to move some cards around, and that's it. I don't have to build the rules into the game, because this is me providing some value along with this software. We're together. We're in this together, So I decided that, wow, I can just slice a lot of this stuff out, find this thin slice that would just be the minimum amount of work I needed to do. And I was done before I knew it. And I had no deadline pressure or anything. It was just like, I got a solution by deciding to maximize what I didn't have to do. And I was done sooner and ready sooner and less
Right.
stressed and all that.
I love that. Like, I could even tell in your tone, Josh, like that you got more excited when you recognize, like, whoa, actually, I can get all of these things done. And I saw that Penny left a comment here. It's the dopamine hit when you get something working. The sooner I see forward progression / deliver something of value, the more motivated I am to keep going. It also makes it easier to get through obstacles. It is that dopamine hit. It's like, whoa, I actually made a lot of forward momentum because I wasn't trying to take on too much.
Yes. Yeah, that's really a great point Penny is raising about the dopamine hit. Just feeling good about exposing what you're doing and learning faster, right? Learning sooner.
Absolutely.
When I write, like let's say I'm writing a blog, I will expose it to people inside of IL long before it's ready. I'm comfortable doing that. I don't have any ego invested. I'm like, look, early draft here. It's got a ways to go, but I do want your feedback. And so a lot of times that'll, take it in a different direction. One blog I recently started, Wyatt started adding some things, and I realized, you know what, we should be co-authors on this because, he was adding some ideas I hadn't thought of, and that wouldn't have happened if I just stayed, nose down to the grindstone, creating it on my own. So it's this sooner collaboration, sooner feedback, sooner time to quality results.
Absolutely.
We're kind of obsessed with the word continuous, aren't we, as well? How does the word continuous relate to this concept of sooner?
Yeah, so I think one thing about sooner too is it mitigates risk. And I think with bringing up continuous, we can talk about continuous integration of all the developers, not just the developers, but the entire team integrating their work together, minute by minute, hour by hour, and continuous delivery of us actually deploying the thing to production, actually getting the things into customers' hands sooner. The more and more we do that, the less risk there is involved. I think that's a really big part of sooner is that risk mitigation.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it's continuous is kind of almost synonymous with practice for me in my mind. So the more that we practice something, the more comfortable we're going to get. Like Josh, you even talking about, sending out a blog to all of us, and we all try and practice that, where it's like, let's not have ego in this and just share with each other so we can get better at it. And I think when you first start doing that, it feels a little like, ooh, especially if you're new somewhere. But the same thing goes for, asking questions from a communication standpoint of continuous. If we're hesitating and we're not asking questions because we either have imposter syndrome or we're dealing with imposter syndrome, or we think, oh, I don't know if this is a stupid idea. The more we practice doing that, the better we're going to get at doing it, and the less afraid we're going to be. I've worked in teams. I actually had the experience of working with a team of leaders early on when the whole world had shut down, and it was the most quiet team of leaders I had ever worked with. And so we kind of had to find ways to get people to feel comfortable talking again. And I kind of did this virtual talking stick where first 3 minutes of the call, it's going to be like a 5 to 7 word response, like your favorite thing to do outdoors, the worst movie you've ever seen, something really simple, but just to get people used to the sound of their own voice. Then all of a sudden on the next few calls, they're laughing together, they're talking, and they're talking about the stuff that starts to really matter because they're getting more practice and they're doing it more continuously. So for me, those words are really tied together.
Right. Awesome story. Yeah. Getting them to participate sooner and interact sooner is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a saying that I like sort of related to this, which is if something's painful, do it more.
Right.
So it's kind of similar to that. If it's painful to talk, well, force yourself to kind of talk. And I think, like you were saying, the talking stick's a really nice way where everybody has to kind of go and do that. I've used this strategy for, again, teams that have been doing only do deployments once every 2 or 3 months. You know what? Let's do a deployment once a month. let's do deployment once a week. Okay. And now we keep doing it. And the more and more painful it gets, or the more and more you do it, the less painful you're going to make it. You're going to find ways to make things better.
Absolutely.
So we have a comment here. As Michael Fanger says, as an engineer, I've found that the use of feature flags has really allowed me to deliver sooner, yet mitigate the risk of doing so. Wonderful observation. Yeah, feature flags we weren't always using those, and then they started to become popular, and they give this freedom to as Michael's saying, feel good about putting something out there in production that is behind a feature flag, so that only certain people can see it. And yeah,
I love the use of utilizing tools that are going to actually help us do those things sooner, because sometimes I think we get caught up in more bureaucratic or just kind of functional ways of doing things because we think it's the way that we have to do it. And sometimes we miss those opportunities of kind of those bargains that you're talking about, Josh, like those feature flags that existed, but people were kind of like not really thinking much about them. And then it's like, well, let's think about the actual value behind it, because then it allows us to do things sooner and catch things.
Yeah, in a real product for a client we're building now, this week we just put out some I call them feature fakes. The client calls them painted doors, but they are buttons to do something actually with AI. And we're trying to gauge interest in these AI features. So they don't do anything yet, but if you click it, it basically is going to ask you some questions about how interested are you in this feature, and get some data from you. You don't want to do this all the time because you drive people crazy. They'd be afraid to press buttons, right? But every now and then, it's a really good technique, and it's to get feedback sooner, right? It's to learn sooner. It's to understand, because you can build it. We all know you can build a million features that are never going to get used,
right,
or rarely used. And
Been there, done that, and it doesn't feel great.
Right, we all have. So it's wonderful to, that's a very lean startup-y type of thing, is to validate or invalidate things early as possible and as quickly as possible. And it's different from surveying people, where you ask them a survey question. This is, did they click because they thought it would do something for them? That's very, very cool, right?
Right. I love this quote that John Bach just posted. So sooner equals quicker than whatever the expectation was, which could mean that we do less features, or features where the quality isn't as good, but the problems are forgivable for now, or a limited audience who is more apt to forgive. And I think there's such power behind knowing your audience, or knowing what subset of an audience you could have. I mean, that even goes back to the blogging thing, right, Josh? I mean, you and I both write. And so I talk to you often about like, oh, when's too soon to show someone? It's like never. Just knowing your audience and knowing who should be taking a look at something so we can learn from it and learn to do that sooner.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point that John's making. And it reminds me of a huge light bulb moment for me in my career. And I was still, I believe, in the late 90s or early 2000s, when I came across John's brother's paper. I don't remember the name of the paper, but it's James Bach. And he basically asked the question, do you know what bugs to ship with? And at the time, I was at the time before reading that, I think, well, there should be zero bugs. But his point was, well, what bugs are acceptable to ship with? And I think that really also speaks to the same quote from John, and knowing who that audience is and what's acceptable. Because it's not that I'm advocating for bugs. It's just that we know that there's different levels of quality.
Right.
And what is your intention right now? If you want to get that sooner feedback or that sooner learning, what's okay, to be.
And your customer might actually be fine with that too. Again, software is to help automate something. Like, all software is just that.
Right.
And yeah, there's been times where, I've helped build automated reportings for just product people internally in organizations. And there's some rough edges around it, but like, no, this saves me like 2 hours of like making pivot tables in Excel. This is fine. This is great.
You're grossing me out, Kody.
I know, I'm grossing everybody out in chat right now. But yeah, I mean, it really does. It goes back to talk to your customers. As soon as you find what little thing that you built that actually delivers that value, and they can find it useful, it's good, and you can iterate from there.
I love this quote: all features are bugs until proven
I know,
otherwise.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And John Buck has also posted the name of that article that really moved me so much back then, The Challenge of Good Enough Software.
Yeah.
Really, really light bulb moment for me reading that. And yeah.
I think that there's also, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the communication side of things, but I feel like we've all been having conversations internally at IL and then elsewhere around nice versus kind. Nice meaning when we talk together, even as a team, as we're creating something, if we're being nice, like we're avoiding things that might feel painful or that we're judging ourselves on, versus kind, which is being more direct, but having empathy for that person. And I think that that's another thing that kind of comes into practice here. Like, being okay with good enough also means coming to the table with ideas that might not end up flying. And that is okay, because there might be a piece of that that's super valuable. And you're starting to learn things, and other people are learning things as you all start to kind of cross-pollinate and collaborate on what you're actually trying to create. So I think moving away from that culture of nice, and being kind, which is can be kind about, this article is really great, and I also think it could benefit from you clarifying X, Y, and Z, you know, and learning how to do that. And that is another thing that I think comes from practice.
Yeah.
And the nice mentality, you're still kind of pushing against maybe the idea, but you're doing it in different ways, and it takes a lot longer. And you're really ending up in a place, again, with risk management, where you're just kind of like, say there's some idea that no one agrees with, but everybody wants to be really nice about it, and they keep investing in that idea. Now we're just kind of wasting time that we could have been doing on something else, or we could have just realigned with a quick conversation.
Yeah, nice isn't nice when it makes, it pushes things to be later.
Yeah.
Right. It's you're being nice by just sweeping it under the carpet, or you're being nice, you think you're being nice by sweeping it under the carpet, or just delaying it. And that's not actually a high performance behavior. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because like what we're talking about here is just so many things that rely on the people, the process, the programming. Sooner impacts all of those things.
Yeah.
And it's always a stretch goal. I think we can always do better at Sooner. You know, it's never like you arrived.
Yeah. I also think, you know, with Sooner, when we talked at the beginning about, you know, not hurrying or rushing, I think when we have had conversations with stakeholders or executives and folks and customers who are like, you know, they really want it now. It's also getting others to understand Sooner is a much more valuable approach, and that language matters. You know, if we're talking about Sooner, we're not talking about we need all these deliverables now. That doesn't sound, you know, quick or soon to me. That sounds rushed. That sounds like pressure.
Right.
And I often refer to it as the pressure cooker, where I understand that, like, we all understand stuff needs to get done. We need to be able to deliver. And that also means changing our lens on what Sooner actually means.
And you say that, and I think Sooner does not play well with high WIP, with high work in progress. If you have a tremendous amount of things work in progress, if you're split between many different projects or initiatives, your Sooner will not be doing too well. You got a lot of work to do on Sooner, because flow of value doesn't work well when you're multitasking and trying to do too many things at once. So, you know, Sooner could influence your thinking around lowering work in process.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can't. Yeah, we all know with like a million things in progress, we're going to build all these queues, and we're going to have to do manual steps of working together because we're delaying that collaboration, and the customer is going to be left out with, you know, again, this goes back to if you had a conversation with the customer, you realize 20% of the actual scope that maybe is being asked for is the only 80% of the value.
Right.
And then we build that, do that all together, lower the WIP, and then you can actually get a product out and get your return on investment faster.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So we have about 1 minute left. Any closing thoughts about this word Sooner? I should mention we have 2 more sessions coming up in the next couple of weeks about this. We're going to get into some case studies that look at all 3 words in our mantra, which is better, software, sooner. Those 2 case studies will exemplify how we approach that in real life situations.
Yeah.
we'll hope to see you there the next couple of weeks. But any final thoughts?
I think a final thought from me, I really like the idea of putting sooner into practice, and the key word is practice. So having conversations around what that could look like and how we can start to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, to change the way that we're creating, to change the way that we're collaborating, and change the way we're delivering. Really, I think Kody put it well around, I'm not going to quote it perfectly, Kody, but if it's painful, then do it more, to really discover how you can do more sooner.
Yeah, that's what I want to leave with. If it's painful, do it more. Try that out. I mean, it works with most things in life. You'll find ways to make it less painful, and then you'll do it even more frequently. You'll get things done sooner.
And I'll say I'll just hope to see you sooner than later for our next session. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone. Take care.